Hi everyone, it's Allie back with Awakening with Allie. So excited to be here with another incredible guest. I have Jordan Cardarelli, who is a Gene Keys guide and founder of Cosmic Skin, an online platform dedicated to sharing the Gene Keys in a modern, grounded way. Through her courses and offerings, she guides clients into pristine alignment with their energetic signature as a blueprint for life, business, and everything in between. We're going to get into everything, guys, about cosmic DNA and her digital guide and gene keys. And if you don't know what gene keys are, don't worry, stick around because we're going to get into all things about it. I'm so excited. So, Jordan, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, you're welcome. So excited. So, okay, tell me, for those that don't know, what gene keys are, though I do feel like more and more people are starting to get into this more and learn about it. But I love that you come from like a really grounded space, which I think is cool because obviously not everybody's as woo as us, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
So like, how did you get into this? Because I imagine just from like what I've read about you and follow you on social and everything, like you must have had some type of spiritual awakening that kind of brought you into this space.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a seeker my whole life, I would say, just very curious about whatever lies beneath the surface of life, like all of the not obvious things, right? So, I mean, I've been exploring the esoteric subjects for a really long time in my life, but the gene keys came much later. I discovered the gene keys probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. And it was after, my Saturn return, which is happened in my late 20s. And a lot started to unfold at that time, as it does for all of us. And I sort of was reconnecting with some of my more spiritual practices. So I was in Kundalini yoga and I was doing a lot of like lifestyle changes with myself personally. I was also diving into human design, which is a sister science to the gene keys. So I had this sort of background knowledge with these cosmic systems, these newer cosmic systems. And I always say, like, the gene keys found me. It found me at a time where I had already done a lot of healing and a lot of discovery in my adult years. And so when I looked at my profile, I was able to recognize right away how accurate and succinct it was at describing basically everything I had discovered over the past, 4, 5, 6 years at that point of my spiritual reawakening, let's say, and self discovery journey. So I was just blown away right away with the information and what was there and what the kind of like most important aspects are of the gene keys. And I just loved it. And so I dove deep into understanding my profile in working with it in sort of a hands-on way, and then shared it with like friends and family and things like that at first, and then opened up just like little sessions for clients, and one thing just kind of led to another. So that's really the gene keys
That's
story.
awesome. Okay, so a couple things that you mentioned just for like my audience, and because I know I have a lot of new people who are kind of awakening or kind of dabbling more into the cosmic space and the spirituality. You mentioned your Saturn return. I know what that is, but for those that don't, could you? That's obviously a whole nother episode, but could you give like a quick synopsis of like what it was for you and like what it is for most people and why it kind of reawakened you and then you came back into your spiritual practices?
Yeah. So the Saturn return is a phenomenon that happens in everybody's life. It's when the planet Saturn returns to the point that it was when you were born in the sky. So I have Saturn in Sagittarius. I don't know the exact degree, but it returned to Sagittarius, and it will in everybody's birth chart between about 27 to 30 or 31. It's not like exact by age, but you can always look it up online. There's calculators and things like that. So Saturn is really the planet of karma. It's also a planet that asks you to work. It asks you to do something with this life. So it can be tied to purpose. And it's really said that before your spiritual awakening, this is our like cosmic childhood. This is like when we're still sort of sampling around and kind of living life on our own terms. But when Saturn returns, it's sort of asking you to grow up in this way that's like, you came here for a reason, it's ready for you to step into it. And so, depending on where you're at in your journey, a lot can change at that time. Like, this is when people, might change careers or have these like little quarter life crises, right? Where they're on one path, but it doesn't feel right anymore. And so there's a lot of endings and beginnings during this time. And it can also feel like, Saturn sometimes can feel like pressure, right? Because it is like the taskmaster planet. So it does ask something of us, like responsibility wise. So if you had those tougher years between 27 to 31 and found yourself in somewhere totally different after, that's often, yeah.
I'm like, that's me. That's me. I'm like, some people like who like have watched my journey, like from like, like back in my like 20s to now being, 37 years old. They're like, you were like massively obsessed with fashion, became a celebrity stylist. Now you're doing breath work and like you talk all about spirituality. Like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's funny because I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I do know because this feels like my soul essence. Like, this literally feels like me. And I'm like, so beyond happy that I'm in this space. And it's just so funny because I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I got here, but like, I'm here.
Yeah, it feels right. It's interesting. We get asked to choose a lot of things before that age, right? It's like find your
Yeah.
life partner, find your forever career, and it's
Mhm.
just sometimes like life's not always up to us, right? Like,
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and I love that you said too that like you get kind of asked to do the work in the sense of like you step into this like divine purpose of like why you're actually here, how you're probably serving for the highest good of all, and like how that all comes together. And so like for you, I'm curious before you found Gene Keys found you, or the you found Gene Keys. I get that because I say the same thing. I'm like the breath found me, so I get it.
yeah.
But like how before you got into this, like what were you doing before? Like what did life look like for Jordan? In a short little bit before we move over full into Gene Keys and dive in.
Yeah. Well, professionally, I was working in banking and finance. So similar, like,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I do have that side to me. It's probably why, like, I teach the gene keys in sort of like a systemized way. I tend on that like logical side, which is funny to think about too. But yeah, I spent about 10 years in banking and finance. And so it just, it doesn't, just because you can do something doesn't mean it's your path, right? And so,
Hmm.
at that time it was just not fulfilling for me, and it felt like an uphill climb and fitting myself into just like a box that didn't really represent who I was. And
Yeah.
so, it was like a process of I just kept having this feeling of like I just want my home life to match my work life, to match who I am in my own time, like, and not have these roles that aren't cohesive at all, and just like be me, be
Yeah.
me at work, be me with friends, be me wherever, right? So that was sort of the start of that process, like that unwinding of getting rid of all the things that I was doing,
Yeah.
goals that I had that just weren't organic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, that they just like weren't aligning with the rest of like what you were doing. And I love that too of how you were saying like the matching up of like, okay, my personal, like my home and then my business, like I totally get that. And I think a lot of people when they start to kind of like awaken and go through their process, like all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, this is not in flow and this feels off and this doesn't feel like me. I don't feel like I'm showing up authentically in this space. And like it just all starts to like crack you open in that sense. And then you're like, oh wait, I gotta change everything, like you said.
Yes. And it becomes, as you awaken, you become more sensitive as well in every level. And so that can become very like intolerable. Whereas before it was like easier to be able to do that. And then all of a sudden it's like, ugh, it's like wearing clothes that don't fit. And then, like,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
true. That's such a good point. It's like you, because I guess you come into that such an authentic space and you do become more sensitive and I guess more conscious. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't show up and play this role anymore. I have to like actually really go with like my soul essence and I can't just like be here even though I know how to do it, like you said, but it's like, but I can't do it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a
And
good way to explain it because it's like a really grounded way to explain it.
Yeah, it's like something that you can't control that's deeper, that's just like bleh. And there
Yeah.
gets
That's
allergic.
such a, that's such a good expression. Ugh, it's so true. I got to that. It was like all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I know I love this and I'm good at it. And like I keep getting calls for it, but like, ugh, I'm drained. I can't do it anymore. Like I'm just like the life's been sucked out of me. It's like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's your sign
So
of it for sure.
right? Yeah. And I love that you said this, your sign to pivot because I think so many people like can go through things, right? And they just kind of stay asleep and don't like actually see something as a sign. They're just like, oh, whatever. And they keep pushing through, they keep like grinding and forcing themselves to like keep doing it. But it's like you just heard it, guys. Like that's your sign when you like feel something like that, when you experience something like that, it's letting you know, like, hey, this doesn't work anymore. Like, let's, switch this up. So this is a great way to go into now your journey and being like
Yeah.
this master in the Gene Keys space and like everything you're doing. So tell us all a little bit about Gene Keys. And then, guys, I gave her my info. So we're going to share a little
Mhm.
about me, which I'm excited to learn.
Yeah.
So, yeah, tell us about Gene Keys.
Yeah, so the gene keys are a cosmic modality, so similar to, let's say, like astrology or human design. And I know human design has been like kind of a hot modality for the past few years. And so, if anyone's listening who's familiar with human design, the gene keys is very much connected because it's getting a bit technical, but there's a piece in human design called the gates. There's 64 of them, and that's actually what translates to the gene keys system. There's 64 gene keys. So basically, the gene keys are a system of 64 energies that are said to make up everything in this entire existence, me, you, and everything that we see. And we get this profile. So, just like other cosmic modalities, you get a profile. It has 11 bubbles. So, you get 11 gene keys that are specific to you and your life's journey. And it's based on your birth details. So, date, time, and place of birth. It plots where the planets are in the sky, where they're activating, what gene keys they're activating. And this tells us a story about, oh my gosh, so many different things. I mean, on a whole, it tells us where you're evolving to in this lifetime and really what your destiny is when you're in alignment. And then it also shows you on the flip side what being out of alignment might look like and feel like to you, which is called the shadow. And so it's a beautiful sort of like, I call it like a workable system because you get to actually explore those things that are keeping you held back and to really see what you're, so back to like what we were talking about earlier, the more you're able to express those 11 energies that are specific to you through work, relationships, everything that you do, the more aligned you will be, right? And this is a felt experience. It's like life is in flow, it's not easy, it's just easeful. And you will feel in love with your work, in love with life, in love with the people around you, and all those beautiful things we all want to feel. So that's really what the gene keys are. Um, you don't have to do the work for yourself, right? There's free generators online that you just plug your details in, and then you get this picture with the 11 gene keys that are, your energy, your energetic signature.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And, I was saying this to a friend of mine the other day who's still kind of feeling into this world and is like, she's like dabbling, but not 100% sure. And I was like, well, when you start from a really basic level, like
Yeah.
we're all energy, right? And so how you were saying, like that flow, that ease, that grace, like it makes sense to me when you think of gene keys, if that's like the 11 centers of energy, then if you're aligning everything how it should be and how it's going to work for you, then it's going to be in flow and then everything else is going to essentially flow together. And I love that you said it doesn't mean that it's easy. It just means that things are essentially in flow, things are in harmony. And so you're enjoying more, you're receiving more, you're feeling more. And you're right, it is such a heartfelt feeling. It really is like it's your soul resonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. It's a system of self awareness as well. So it's also this beautiful tool we have to like really gauge where we're at in any moment and to feel better on a daily basis. It's a tool, like it's a spiritual tool in our toolbox. So it just gives us a perspective of where we might be and why we might be feeling off or we might be feeling good, so that it's not just like life's always happening to us. We actually have this tool to navigate to see like why things might not be working very well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's so cool. So tell me, like, because you have a guide, right? That's a digital guide. So is that kind of similar to like how someone would go on and type in like their information and then they'd be able to like understand a little bit about themselves?
Yeah, so I know that on the Gene Keys website, it's free, so you can type in your birth information. It's going to give you the official chart so that you can have it, you can download it, and then you have it forever. I believe there's like a little snapshot of information on the Gene Keys official website. I created these digitals sort of as a like side offering because there's everything sort of in one place and it's personalized to you. So it basically has like I call it a Gene Keys digital profile reading, and it breaks down what you're seeing. So it's going to break down, there's different components in the system, like the sequences, there's spheres, right, that tell you the specific areas of life that you're looking at. And then it will tell you about your 11 gene keys as well, so that you can match them together. And honestly, with that information, that can take you like really, really deep into your profile.
Really cool. So for you, before we dive into mine, for
Yeah.
you, when you started getting into this, and then like obviously we're going through your own shifts and your own awakenings and everything, did you like start attuning to yours and then kind of start following, and then that's how you were able to get into what you're doing now? Like, can you give us a little snapshot of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm also running a program right now called Creatrix Codes, which is Gene Keys for Business, because the Gene Keys are an amazing model for business or for career, because there is a sequence that talks about the four gifts you're here to share with others. I mean, there's another sequence that talks about more like relationships and healing. And then there's a third sequence that talks about how you're designed to serve others through your work and receive abundance for it. So there's a lot of places that are very specific to what you're meant to do here in the world, the energy you're meant to bring and align with in your business. So, to be honest, from day one, with sharing the gene keys and then eventually creating a brand, Cosmic Skin, and then making all kinds of different adjustments like over the past 3 years, I've really used my Gene Keys profile as a guide for my business in that way. So they're like synonymous with each other. It's almost hard to like talk about them as separate entities at this. Like my business journey has been following my profile, and then of
Mm,
course like I obviously share the gene keys for work, so they're so tied together. um but yeah, I mean, the more that I refine, because it's a life's process. I always say that too. It's not like, sometimes we can look at a profile and think, oh my gosh, like I'm so far off, or how do I get to be this now? It's just not like that. It's really meant to serve as a guide throughout life, right? So I'm always in this process of refining. And when we look at your Gene Keys profile, when I mean refining, what you're going to see are three keywords. So there's something called a frequency spectrum with this system. And each of your gene keys has a very high frequency expression. So, like if you were aligned with all the highest frequencies in your profile, this would be you in pristine alignment. This would be you living your codes, your destiny. And then there's the shadow frequency, which is the lower frequency expression of your profile. So, refining always means attuning more to the higher frequencies and then healing what lives in the shadow. And that's how we come into alignment. So there's a lot of exploration to do on all levels.
yeah.
Yeah, we're
And
getting
when
deep.
you, no, that's cool. So when you, obviously I know, but like for those that maybe don't, when you mention the shadow, you're referring to like essentially the shadow work, like what we have. We all have darkness within us, we have light within us. Essentially, you're dancing within the darkness of your shadow, figuring out how to work with that. So
Yeah,
it's not essentially taking over you. Is that right?
yeah, totally. So we're, I mean, we're never perfect, right? We're never
Totally.
going to be. That's not why we came here. We came here to experience polarity. So there's the light of us and all the great moments, but then there's also the heavier stuff and the more challenging moments. So we're never going to be like, I don't know, unless you want to dedicate your life to just like becoming an awakened monk or something like that. I guess you can totally do. But for most of us, we're here living a real human experience, right? So we're going to ebb and flow between those like good habits we have and like some of the bad habits we have. But what I love about the Gene Keys for shadow work, for anyone who's like interested in dabbling with that, is what really exists in those shadow frequencies are some of the limiting beliefs. So the beliefs we hold that limit us, or the fears that we're working through. So it's not that, like, when you look at your profile, those shadow keywords can sting, right? Like there's a couple in your profile, it's like greed, indifference, failure, like they're stingy, right? But it's not that we are those things, or whatever the case. It's just that we are working with that particular energy. We're working through some beliefs that live there, some fears that live there. And when we heal them, that's when we get to experience more fluidity, more ease, right? And more space between us and like that reactive part.
I love that you said space. That's so true. It's like you're creating that because you're more in flow, because you're willing to do the work and see that and evolve through that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so now they're like, greed, this, none of it. Oh God, what's mine? Let's dive into me.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything that you're interested in particular with your profile?
I
Like
mean,
area of life?
I would say probably, I guess, career first, just because, like, how you were also saying, it's like part of, a lot of like when you go through the changes from like when you're 20s to like that late 30s and to like, much later, I would say like mid late 30s is when I started kind of going through like my awakening and started shifting and just things weren't resonating anymore. All of a sudden, like being the most extroverted person, didn't want to be like out and, didn't
Mhm.
want to, be here, wanted to be there, or wanted to be with, somebody clients and all these things that just fell off. And it was like, what is happening to me? Um, and then, like I said, like, breath work found me. And then it was like, oh, wait, I feel like I'm home. Like all of a sudden I came home to myself, but like I didn't even know that this part of me like existed. And now I'm like facilitating people and doing breath work and like madly in love with helping people like find a regulated nervous system and be empowered, and using that to help moms like further, their lives and empower themselves with their kids. And, so it's, and then it's funny, like, because I become so conscious, I'm also now bringing this back into fashion and like being like, okay, for people who are open enough to receive it in fashion, like, how can I help them be conscious of what they're wearing and like conscious of dressing themselves versus just like the ego, if you will, of like, I want to look good.
I love that. I love that. So you have something really interesting in your profile. So there's a place in your profile, everybody's profile, called your life's work. This is your most important energy to work with. It's where the sun is when you're born. And just like any cosmic modality, where the sun is, it's the most important part of your personality. It tends to code a lot of us. And if you don't look anywhere in your gene keys other than this, it's going to be an amazing tool for you. So if you're just starting out on your journey, I highly recommend going deeper and understanding your life's work gene key first.
Okay.
So what's interesting is this is always your strongest gift you're here to share with others, and a really resonant brand image for you to show up as. And it tends to lead to a lot of success and visibility when you're in these high frequencies. Other people receive you in that really authentic light. It's magnetic, right? Like we were talking about before, the more
Yeah.
that you show up as you, it's like people can really hear you and see you. So what's interesting is you have Gene Key 53 there, and Gene Key 53 has a gift of beginnings. It's like you have this ability to really understand what needs to happen in the beginning of something in order for it to grow and grow and grow and flourish. But the other part that's interesting is you have another gift that's just as important. Well, it's another important gift, not just as important, but another important gift in your profile, and it's a gift of endings. So you actually have what we'd call like a gift of cycles that are, it's very prominent in your genius or your activation sequence. So you're actually somebody who is attuned to natural cycles of life. You understand them very deeply, and you're also here to sort of share them as a role model or guide in a way of something that you understand just very naturally. So it's like leading people through a process from beginning to end is something that you are really gifted with, and it's actually
Mm.
something that would be aligned for you with your work. Does that resonate?
Yeah. I mean, I guess even just what we were just speaking to with like closets and styling, like helping people be able to start in their closets, like what's the energy behind it, like what's being created, how do they feel, to like getting to the end of being in flow, being excited about their clothes closet, being conscious of it, being empowered, like feeling good in what they're wearing, like, that kind of start to finish. And I guess kind of same with the breath, like helping people start out with like what are they holding, what are they maybe releasing, what trauma, what is it going on, breathing them through, facilitating them, and then taking them to the end where then
Yes.
they hopefully have a regulated nervous system and they are able to see, and heal and move through. And so, yeah, it's really interesting.
I love that. I love how you were able to just like bounce that back so fast that you're like, oh, yeah, I get that. Because it is just a natural inclination that you would have to understand that for something to thrive, it needs to have this really solid beginning, and then you're able to actually take them to the end and close it off. So that can be applied to, like you said, like if there's different aspects of your career past that you've applied this to, yet there's kind of um, that natural theme that
Okay.
unfolds.
Yeah.
There's also another place in your profile that's standing out to me. It's your vocation sphere. And this is a journey. It represents a really deep kind of healing journey that we go on throughout the course of our life because it's also called our core wound. So if you look at the gene key you have there, the shadow, so the lower frequency expression, is always this sort of like energy that we're dealing with and we're learning about from very early on in life, and it can be difficult. It's called our core wound obviously for a reason, right? And it can really show up in relationships as well from very young. And the reason why we're getting attuned to the like more of the difficult aspect of this energy is because you're designed to actually share it as your medicine in the future.
Mm.
Yeah, and so you have gene key 23, and this is all about it's about simplicity. So the core wound is complexity, and the high frequency, the medicine you're here to share is simplicity. So for you, it's that process of healing through different stories and fears about like life needing to be complicated. Sometimes there's this little with this particular gene key, there can be like fears or beliefs around not being able to communicate in like a succinct or simple way that people can understand. So anywhere where you've experienced that, like life needing to be complicated or life needing to be hard or not being able to just like express or live it just like simply the way that you feel, you have you have a second line there too. So it would be like something very natural for you. Anything that felt like you were
Mm.
able to connect with just the natural expression that you're of your life, that's really what you're healing or you have been healing. And then your medicine you're here to share with others is actually probably sharing either a modality or a process that you see different than other people in a very simplified way, where people are like, oh my God, I've never heard of breath work that way. Like, I've never heard of breath work explained that way, or I've never had a breath work ceremony led that way. Like, this just hits right. Like, this is like, there's none of
Mm.
that fluff, right? It's just so succinct. It connects with people's hearts. There's not all of that extra. That's really your medicine that you're here to share with others.
Wow, that's so
Really
interesting. So with the core wound for all of us, depending on obviously what's showing up in our gene keys and what number and everything that is, basically, so I'm understanding deeper, like it's basically not only just, I guess, the lower frequency, but it actually is part of what we go through in this lifetime of our wounds. And then because of that process, like you said, at least for me, like what I've done to heal or what I've gone through, then is eventually meant to be shared to
totally.
further then be medicine and help others.
Yeah, it's like sharing our learning experience. And sometimes we don't even know we're doing that, right? Like
Mm,
sometimes that's not even conscious.
yeah,
It's just, yeah, it fuels your growth. It fuels our growth so that we become somebody who really understands that energy, like understands the value of simplicity for you.
yeah,
And then you can share that with other people through what it is you do, like making their client experience with your stylist job really like succinct, really simplified, and like taking that off the pressure off for others, or through breath work as
very
examples.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, neat. Okay, very cool.
You're also very sensitive.
And more so over the last few years.
Yeah, so you're this word is thrown around a lot, but you are an empath.
Hmm.
It's your human design profile here as well. So you have a totally open emotional center. I don't know if anyone's told you that before.
No, I've heard like empath. I've heard like, oh, you're sensitive. My whole life, I was told by my parents, you're so
Yeah.
sensitive. You're so sensitive. I heard that my whole life. But I've heard a couple of times, like as I gotten older, like it's more of the empath feel. You saying and completely open, emotional centered. No, that's new verbiage to me.
Okay. Okay. So there's energy centers in your human design profile. And when they're totally open, this means that you are receiving that particular energy from others in a way that's even more amplified than they feel in themselves. And so yours is your emotional center. So when you're alone, you probably have like, ooh, you can kind of like relax and breathe out. And it's like you can come back to that center and like feel yourself.
Yeah.
But when you're with other people, actually you're receiving a lot and feeling on behalf of them their emotions.
Mm,
So that can be
that makes sense.
a lot. Yeah. And so it's that process of understanding, oh, it's because he's in a bad mood. Like it's because they're having a bad day. It doesn't actually have anything to do with me. And removing yourself sometimes and just kind of coming back to center and like that process of knowing where you and other people begin. But what's really beautiful is that gift of sensitivity. And like, I think we can get that for sure. Like kids who are more sensitive definitely can get that feedback from parents. It's, it's like, what's wrong with you? And it's just because they're feeling literally everything, right? From like the
Mhm.
sounds to the smell. Like it's also visceral. It can be very visceral as well.
True. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually a really embedded part of your service. Like what you're actually here to share with others is you're using your gift of sensitivity to support others. And that's part of your role in the world. So you're
Oh.
there for a reason. Now, again, like it's that process, you have it in your culture sphere. And our culture sphere is the role we're destined to play in this lifetime. And I like to say it's like if we were all in fabric, everybody in the world was a piece of a quilt. This is your role. So this is who you're
Mhm.
designed to be. And then we all get to fit together in these like perfect pieces, right? So you're hearing that, you're here sharing that gift of sensitivity. And that's also what connects you with abundance and prosperity.
Mm.
Yeah. And then the interesting part too for you, just as a note, is the what's really important for you to open up to abundance and prosperity, and that's in all realms, but definitely materially, which is really fun, but also fulfillment. There's this need for you to because when we're really sensitive and we take on the emotions of others, it can be sometimes hard for letting people to take responsibility for themselves, right? Like we can step
Hmm.
in and
That
try to
resonates. Yeah.
step up and save. Yeah. And so for you, it's creating those kind of boundaries and letting other people take responsibility for their parts, and then understanding your own needs, knowing that you need to meet your own needs first.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely am learning that on my, on my journey and like how to, like you said, like kind of like to separate, like, okay, this is where they begin, this is where I end and not taking it and everything. So that very much resonates and like ties in. And then when you were talking about, you were relating to abundance and like things around that, what would you say, like, how does that connect to the other when it comes to like that sensitivity?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the gene key you have here is it functions as literally as a light switch. So the more we're in our shadow frequency, so the actual shadow frequency of gene key 19 is codependence, which is like another common word in psychology right now. So the more we're in whatever shadow we have there, and everyone's going to have a different shadow, the more we're kind of closed off and not able to receive the abundance that's meant for us. So it's going to tell a different story for absolutely everybody. But looking at your profile just overall, and again, it's going to print out different in everyone's lives. So,
Yeah.
one-on-one sessions are excellent for this too. But for yourself, it's like, it would be more about you over giving and not
Mm.
allowing yourself to receive back.
Oh yeah,
That
that resonates.
yeah.
Okay.
So that actually cuts you off from being able to feel totally fulfilled and abundant. And
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So when I do that and I'm not necessarily conscious of it and I'm
yeah,
doing it, it's essentially like cutting off my frequency of being able to receive more.
exactly. So it is energetic. I love that you said that. It is energetic. And then sometimes it can be literal, right? So for example, let's say like you had an opportunity pop up, but you were like, oh, I can't because I'm too busy, or like I'm a mom, stuff like that too, right? It's like
Mm.
putting yourself and your needs last will manifest in those ways of like kind of cutting yourself off from that flow. So
Oh, okay. That's deep, but that I get that hits.
yeah, yes. Um, yeah, and then you also have a gift of listening. Yeah, you're able to actually, so it's really beautiful because it's kind of connected in a way with 19, which is like that sensitivity and that ability to like hold other people's emotions and really understand their needs. And then you also have that gift of listening. So I would bet that like your clients would always say that they felt really feel really heard and seen by you for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and that you really understand them and get them and what they need.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a gift of listening and being able to actually like it's almost like you can hear more than just the words that people are saying. Like you really understand what
Mm.
somebody's trying to communicate on those deeper levels. And it can be very almost like clairaudient in a way where you're like hearing energetically what's
I just
going on.
got, I call them God bumps. As you said that because I've been told clairaudient before about myself, and then I've also been told clairvoyant. So it's interesting that you bring this up.
Yes. Yeah. Does that resonate for you, the clairaudience aspect?
Yeah, I will, and I've been trying to like, naturally, but let myself flow into that more because I've heard clairvoyance a lot, and I've been told my voice and my words and that kind of thing. So I've been
Mhm.
like trying to, I've been flowing more in that space. But now this is the second time I'm hearing this on the audience side. So I'm like, okay, now I have to tune more into that.
Yeah. And what's kind of cool is that it's sort of an overall gift that reveals itself more and more the more that you're in alignment with your other gene keys, because
Mm.
it is. But it's also connected to work. So it might be something cool to practice when you're at work and with clients because it's going to come in pretty,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Yes.
Okay, so being conscious of that essentially when I'm in my space, when I'm working with different clients and different projects, that can basically that gift organically will align is like I allow it to flow through.
And you'll have it everywhere because I always say like we look at it's beautiful, the gene keys are really amazing like that because we get to look at those different aspects of life and we get to really see like what's specifically affecting this, like what's really at play here, but also it's all part of us, so we do carry all of these gifts and all of this energy with us, like no matter if we're with family or with work or what have you. So yeah.
So cool. Wow. Yeah. And so you guys obviously listening to, Jordan, like she's breaking down, bits and pieces of like my gene keys and all these different things. So you would see why you would want to book a one-on-one, with her or an expert who does this, because this is how you're able to look at your true like soul. I mean, your soul blueprint, would you say? Like basically how you're truly laid out and the energetics of it and how it all aligns and how you can either be in flow or like how you were just describing, Jordan, like that light switch. I so relate to that because I never experienced that about myself before. And then over the last few years, especially like, I guess as I awakened more and I became more sensitive and all these different things, like when things wouldn't resonate or when I felt like I was pushing myself and I just didn't want to do it, I would just shut off completely. And it was like, there was no bringing me back in. It was just off. And then like once I would feel that energetic alignment, it was like whoosh, switches on, and that's where I'm at now. And it's like, yes, I'm on. I'm motivated. I'm hyped. I'm excited. Like the energy is just flowing through me. It's like even if I'm not in high vibes all the time, I'm still like just overly in that higher frequency. But I've definitely been like in the way lower over the last few years. So that resonates for sure.
Hmm. And we'll always visit the lower frequencies. So I always like to say, it's like there's that whole like again they sting right when we read some of those or we hear some of them because we're going to resonate with our shadows, they're part of who we are. So I would
Mhm.
like to share too that the goal is never to cut ourselves off from those lower frequency expressions of us because it's the other side and you can see it in your gene keys, it's just the other side of your gifts. So if we were to eliminate them then we wouldn't be connected to who we are in any capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think when people think about shadow work and like, like, oh, I need to do this and I have to, work on this for and that, like you're right. It's like that dance of duality of like being like, okay, this is part of me, part of my gift. It's the other side of it. But then, like you said, but allowing it to like show you and evolve from it versus getting stuck in it. I was saying this to a client the other day. I was doing breathwork with. I was like, you can be of it, but you don't want to be in it, and you don't want to be like stuck in it and like sunk in.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, would
Yeah.
you say that's pretty accurate when you're like kind of looking at, your gene keys, with someone like you and someone's explaining to you, like you said, those, harder, harsher words and those, essentially lower frequencies, the shadow, it's not bad, quote unquote. It's just, like you said, that duality of that, but it's not getting stuck in it so that you're able to still like move through and evolve and continue in what you're doing, right?
Exactly. And I like to say it's the thing with the shadow that I like to say is like don't buy into it. Like
Uh-huh.
it's one thing to observe it and we had a moment and it's there and it's there to inform us that maybe like we're having an off day or we have, oh, that situation's bringing up a particular fear that we have and whatnot, right? But it's more when we start to like dance with it and engage with it and start to believe in the stories. I always say that too, like we believe in the stories that that energy is telling us, and that's not true. We get to choose our perspective.
I love that. Choose our
Yeah.
perspective and not choose the stories. Don't buy into that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really well said.
You can hear them, right? You can hear them or engage with them and feel something about it, but it's when we start to interact with our shadow that's when we can get stuck there for longer periods of time.
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
mean,
No, that's a cool way to break it down.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there anything else you'd want to share from mine that you feel like is like popping out to you? They're like, oh, we should mention this.
Yeah, I mean, you also have a gift that's interesting about knowing what doesn't work.
Hmm.
I actually love this gift. It's Gene Key 32. You have it in your purpose sphere. So we all have four gifts that are active in our profile. It's called our genius sequence. So we get to see like these four sort of like superpower talents that are really natural to us, and we bring it into whatever it is that we do. But the trick really is to find these, like I always say, clean and clear portals with our work so that they can express really clearly. And that's like amazing. Like our energy loves to be expressed, right? It loves to, I always say, life loves to live through us. It wants to
Mhm.
live lives in these specific ways. So when we allow it to, that's when we feel in flow. So your gene key 32 is this gift of sensing actually what isn't going to work. um, and it's a sense. It's literally just a sense. So, like for example, if you're with a client that wants to wear something, it's like, oh, it's just not going to work. Like you just kind of have that little
Oh yeah.
feeling, like, and it's a sense. It's not necessarily explain, but it's almost like you can kind of, based on what's happened in the past, this isn't like a conscious thing that goes on with you in your mind, right? It's just something that you've gathered over time. It's like what's happened in the past and what you know about the future is like, oh, that's just like not going to work. So we need to make some adjustments for that to fit a little bit better. Um, that's an interesting gift that you have as well. It's like a
Interesting.
very subtle sense of like what's not going to work and what will work, and then that's the high frequency expression of the energy. The little thing for you to watch out with the shadow, and because of where it is in particular with your profile, the shadow of this is because that sense can be very loud sometimes. It's sort of always on, right?
Mm-hmm.
There can be a fear of failure that creeps up. So anytime you have that, and because of where it is in your profile, that's actually going to stop you from grounding your purpose here. That's going to be the one thing you're contending with to actually continue to do what it is that you're meant to do.
Mm.
So anytime you feel that like little fear of like, oh, what's going to happen in the future, like a little bit of a fear of failure, it's really helpful for you specifically to reframe it and just say, it's just because I have that gift of knowing, what doesn't work and what does. I'm very sensitive to that. That is just telling me stories right now about like, what if this happens or what if that happens? Just becoming a little bit loud and sort of um, being overactive in the wrong way, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then at the same point of that, right? Like the higher frequency, like you said, like the gift of like knowing when something's not going to work, also
Yeah,
trusting in that, right? And like listening to that gut intuition, like silly,
totally.
like silly share, but I'll like, so the other day, like I've been doing this like marketing, like for one of my businesses, and I just have been feeling it just has been working, it's been off, and they've been trying to get me to like continue. And I've just like had this gut feeling of like, it's time to pull the plug. And I was like going back and forth in my head. And I guess it's kind of like what you were talking about. Because I was like, well, am I afraid that like if it continues and it does really well, that I'm going to get more like too seen and it's not what I want, like this and that. And I did all the things. But then I was like, no, it's actually more of a feeling of like, it's not working. Something's not resonating. Like it's just, yeah, it's not going to work.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And if you're able to listen to that, and the trick is like that's beautiful because you weren't making that mean something about you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's been
Yeah.
a part of my journey too, learning that. That's a really good point for anyone listening to or watching, like not making it about you and understanding like that there's all parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this is just not going to work. It's just
Right.
not. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me or that I'm not working out or that me and that, that I'm not able to do that ever. It's just this one thing. It's a sense, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
able.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's
So
really cool.
yeah, we've kind of covered most of the gene keys very topically in your gift and your pearl sequence. So those are more the ones that are aligned with like business and career. And then there's like a little deeper aspect of the profile called your Venus sequence that takes you more on an emotional journey sort of through your past. And that's a really potent place for anybody who is exploring relationships or healing. And the kind of like trippy journey it takes you on is that before you're able to connect with others on this like very deep healthy level, you connect with yourself there first, so it can take,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a little bit more of a raw place in the profile. And I always say like if you really want to accelerate your healing or spiritual journey you're talking about, you'll explore your Venus sequence, but also it does take a little bit more emotional capacity because we're venturing into childhood, right?
Yeah.
And some things there on more of that like heart level.
Wow. So that's the Venus space.
Yes, that's the Venus sequence. Yeah.
Well, without getting deep into that, is there anything that you're like seeing for me that's like, oh, I should just, mention this? But obviously, like guys like Jordan's saying, whether you're listening or watching, like that's kind of thing is that you deep dive into, you work with someone and you so that you can move through it and you don't get stuck and you don't get like feeling crazy or feeling disconnected, like she said, or like so raw and deep. Because I think all of us, most of us at least that are on this journey have all been through that dark night of the soul at least once.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So I can share one that's standing out for sure. There's a lot there about like there you can explore a lot about like emotional defense mechanisms in this sequence, and then there's also a place that talks about like our relationship kind of portal in a sense. So
Okay.
it's like you're always, attracting sort of like the wrong partner, or the wrong friends or something, you can
Yeah, yeah.
aspect of this sequence. Your SQ sphere is really standing out to me. And this is a place, it's like the deepest part of your heart chakra.
Okay.
Yeah, your SQ sequence is this spiritual aspect of self. And so when we tap back, it also represents the time frame between 0 and 7. So between 0 and 7, it's when our subconscious mind is being wired in. And it's usually before we have like a ton of conscious memory, right? We're still very, very young and we're in a very receptive place. So when we move back to the high frequencies of your SQ sphere, what's interesting is it's like a liberation point because we're getting back to this
Mm,
very childlike state. So it's not like we're childish, right? It's childlike. So we're
yeah.
reconnecting joy and love on the deepest level. And it can feel as adults very, very liberating to heal this shadow and to connect with the higher frequencies. And then always when we're exploring the Venus sequence, it can be very potent to look at any like family stories or things that were going on in life during that time, because it will tend to sort of it makes sense, right? What was going
Sure.
on in the environment.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
As you
very
as you hear my little ones in the background, mom life.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but I'll tell you what, being a mom, especially of littles, and mine especially, I feel like are just like these little star seeds. Like they're just so in their own world. Like it's helped me to anchor more into that like inner child and like allow and like be in that versus like constantly being in like serious mode. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. It's like, it's dance, right? Because sometimes it's like so overwhelming, but then other times it's like I notice when I'm really conscious, like today when I was like cleaning and doing things and they were like just next to me in the room and I had on like my sound frequencies that I listen to, like I love to just like listen in the background and they were just like playing and like talking and and we were having all these little conversations like, Mama, like, we're gonna wear this and we want to dress and be princesses. Watch us become princesses. And like, just like you like sit there and just like take it in and you're like, oh, that's so like it's so fun to just watch them like magically be in their own world. Like how cool. Like we forget as adults that like you could kind of do that, right? You can essentially create anything, but like you lose that. So I love that you said that about kind of like not getting again attached to the stories from like our childhood and all that, but like the healing around it and allowing like the inner child like to really like come out. I think that's really beautiful.
For sure. I mean, I tend on the serious side, like I must admit. So, and it's interesting because in a lot of spiritual lineages, including the Gene Keys, like teachers will talk about how reconnecting to like childlike joy is like really what we're here doing. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's
I love
incredible.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I love it. Well, this was so cool. Thank you so much for sharing about like my chart and like how I can, you know, follow and understand more about like myself. And I've done a little bit of reading on it, but this makes so much more sense of like how it pulls it all together. And like you said, obviously this is kind of just the basics, the surface of like a deep reading. We're doing this, of course, live on my podcast, but like when you do your one-on-ones, you're going into their whole gene keys in all the different areas, depending on like what they're looking at or wanting, right? Whether it's career or family or whatever they're kind of looking at healing or learning.
Oh, we're a bit frozen.
Oh, you're good.
I'm good. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I have Cosmic DNA digitals that kind of give that like overview, which is an amazing place to start. And then, like you said, one-on-one sessions. I don't always have them available. They will be available at the end of the year. But that's amazing because we get to kind of dance around like we did like a little bit today. We get to dive deep into certain aspects. And then there's always sort of like holistic themes that will present themselves as well. So it kind of meets you where you're at. So yeah, there's like the kind of beginner level, then we can go deep and then we can explore different topics as well. Like we were talking about like relationships, business, career. So it's really an all-encompassing
Yeah, so
system.
cool. So would you say like like overall someone who's listening or like, okay, they're becoming more open or they're wanting to explore this, obviously come find you or someone else who's in this space who really understands it and can really break it down and help you and guide you. But you would say, right, whether you're doing basic or you're going deep within this is a great way to essentially look at your soul blueprint, your layout, and kind of see like where am I at, especially if you're in a place of like I was where it's like I feel stuck. I feel like what happened to me? Who am I? Why am I shifting? Why are things changing? It's like, hey, this is kind of like where this is who you are actually meant to be versus what you chose maybe when you were younger.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it definitely helps you realign with your authenticity. And then the beautiful thing about this system and other cosmic systems as well is that it is always going to be yours, right? It's not like something that changes next week or in 5 years from now when you feel different. It's like always going to be your energetic blueprint. So
Oh, I love
something
you
like
say that. Yeah. So it's always yours. It never changes, right?
yeah, and it's amazing because in these times too, right? It just provides that kind of anchor for us to come back to over and over again so we can have that tool
Yeah.
that guide us.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that you said that about anchoring. That's such a good point because it's true. It's like, especially obviously, right, everything that's going on right now in the outer world, it's like finding your own inner peace. I know for me has been so helpful to navigate kind of these more chaotic times, energies. And like, I love that you use the perfect word, anchor. Like anyone who's listening or watching, like if you're needing to anchor into yourself and really understand yourself more, like this is the time to do it. Like, especially now because the world needs us all to be in our purpose.
Definitely. Definitely.
Cool.
Mhm.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much for sharing your gift of doing this and giving me a little bit of my gene keys and really explaining it. It was so cool. Tell us where we can find you and follow you. And again, if they want to get the print that you spoke to like the digital and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so my website is cosmicskin.co. That's co. There's basically everything on there in terms of like information about me, what I do, the gene keys, and then offerings if you're interested. And then I have Instagram. That's basically my only social at the moment. It's cosmic2_skin. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, everything will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jordan. Guys, if you have like any questions or, are like really feeling lost in this journey or just looking for more guidance or want to go deeper in your healing or spiritual awakening, like Jordan was saying, go check her out. Her Instagram is awesome. She's just so badass when it comes to this and like so grounded in this. So for someone who may not be as spiritually awakened, it's really cool to like find someone who is in the middle. I feel like I'm always floating, but not everybody's like me. So it's cool to like find someone who's more like in the middle with it. So guys, seriously, if you're, if this awakened something in you, if this expanded something in you, check Jordan out. I'll put everything in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for listening and watching. Make sure you guys leave a 5-star review on the show. Love, light, and blessings, everyone. Thank you. Bye.